Hare Krishna, welcome all of you for today's Bhagavad Gita reading session. Let us begin with prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, Chapter 3, entitled Karma Yoga. Text 40. Indriyani manobuddhir asyadhishthanamuchyate etairvimohayatyesha jnanamavritya dehinam. Synonyms. Indriyani, the senses. Manaha, the mind. Buddhihi, the intelligence. Asya, of the lust. Adhishthanam, sitting place. Uchyate, called. Etaihi, by all these. Vimohayati, bewilders. Eshaha, of this. Jnanam, knowledge. Avritya, covering. Dehinam, the embodied. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Purport. The enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul, and therefore Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all the activities of the senses, and thus the mind is the reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter, and thus with the mind and senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. यस्यात्म बुद्धि कुणपे त्रिधातुके स्वधिकलत्रादिषु भौम इत्यधीः यत्तीर्थबुद्धिसलिलेन कर्हि सलितेन कर्हिचित् यत्तीर्थबुद्धिसलिलेन कर्हिचित् जनेष्वभिघ्नेषु स एव घोकरः. The human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of birth as worshipable, and who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge there, is to be considered as an ass or a cow. Text 41. तस्मात् त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहिह्येनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम्. Synonyms. Tasmat, therefore. Tvam, you. Indriyani, senses. Adav, in the beginning. Niyamya, by regulating. Bharatarshabha, O chief amongst the descendants of Bharata. Papmanam, the great symbol of sin. Prajahi, curb, he, certainly, enam, this, jnana, knowledge, vijnana, scientific knowledge of the pure soul, nashanam, destroyer. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self realization. Purport. The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self realization and specifically knowledge of the self. Jnanam refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non self, or in other words, knowledge that the spirit soul is not the body. Vijnanam refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul and knowledge of one's constitutional position and his relationship to the supreme soul. It is explained thus in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Jnanam paramaguhyam me yadvijnana samanvitam sarahasyam tadangam cha grihana gaditam maya. The knowledge of the self and the supreme self is very confidential and mysterious, being veiled by maya. But such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if it is explained by the Lord Himself. Bhagavad Gita gives us that knowledge, specifically knowledge of the self. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So, from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. Lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So, from any stage of life, or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of Godhead, the highest perfectional stage of human life. Text 42. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param manah manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe paratastu saha. Synonyms. Indriyani, senses. Parani, superior. Ahuhu is said. Indriyebhyaha, more than the senses. Param, superior. Manaha, the mind. Manasaha, more than the mind. Tu, also. Para, superior. Buddhihi, intelligence. Yaha, one who. Buddhehe, more than the intelligence. Parataha, superior. To, but. Saha, he. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Purport. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the bodily functions, as described here, ultimately end in the Supreme Soul. Bodily action means the functions of the senses, and stopping the functions, sorry, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act as it does during dreaming. But above the mind, there is the determination of the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. If, therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and the senses, will be automatically engaged. In the Katha Upanishad, there is a passage in which it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and mind is superior to the sense objects. If, therefore, the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance of the senses becoming engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of its being engaged in the lower propensities. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is the solution of the whole problem. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the objects of senses. One has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness, by complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind. Text 43. एवं बुद्धे परं बुद्ध्वा संस्तभ्यात्मानमात्मना जहि शत्रुं महाबाहो कामरूपं दुरासदम्. Synonyms. Evam, thus, buddhehe, of intelligence, param, superior, buddhva, so knowing, samstabhya, by steadying, atmanam, the mind, atmana, by deliberate intelligence, jahi, conquer, shatrum, the enemy, mahabaho, O mighty armed one, kamarupam, the form of lust, durasadam, formidable. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence, One should control the lower self by the higher self, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Purport. This third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering impersonal voidness as the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and sense gratification are the greatest enemies of the conditioned soul, but by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so called practice of yoga postures can never help a man toward spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. Thus end the Bhakti Vedanta purports to the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Karma Yoga or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. Now we are beginning a new chapter, chapter 4. Chapter 4 entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Text 1. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Imam vivasvate yogam proktavanahamavvyayam vivasvan manave praha manurikshvakave bravit. Synonyms. Shri Bhagavanuvacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Imam, this, vivasvate, unto the Sun God, yogam, the science of one's relationship to the Supreme, proktavan, instructed, aham, I, avyayam, imperishable, vivasvan, vivasvan, the Sun God's name, manave, unto the Father of mankind, of the name Vaivasvata, praha, told, Manuhu, the father of mankind, Ikshvakave, unto King Ikshvaku, Abravit, said. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The Blessed Lord said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. Purport. Herein we find the history of the Bhagavad Gita traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order, the kings of all planets. This science is especially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand it in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from the material bondage to lust. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge in eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the signs of Krishna consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. In this millennium, the sun god is known as Vivaswan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated, Yachakshuresha Savita Sakalagrahanam Raja Samastasuramurtirashesha Tejaha Yasyajnaya Brahmati Sambrita Chakro Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Let me worship, Lord Brahma said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present of the name Vivaswan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivaswan his first disciple to understand the science of Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not, therefore, a speculative treatise for the insignificant mundane scholar, but is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. In the Mahabharata Shanti Parva, chapter 348, verses 51 to 52, we can trace out the history of the Gita as follows. Treta Yugadau Tato Vivaswan Manave Dadau मनुष्यलोकभृत्यर्थं सुतेये सुतायेक्ष्वाकवे ददौ इक्ष्वाकुणा च कथितो व्याप्य लोकान् अवस्थिताः. In the beginning of the Treta Yuga millennium, this science of the relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivaswan to Manu. Manu, being the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this earth planet, and forefather of the Raghu dynasty in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita existed in the human society from the time of Maharaj Ikshvaku. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. Before this, there was Dwapar Yuga, about 800,000 years, and before that there was Treta Yuga, 1,200,000 years. Thus, some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son Maharaj Ikshvaku, the king of this planet Earth. The age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 years have passed. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciple, the sun god Vivaswan, a rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago, and in human society it has been extant for 2 million years. It was re-spoken by the Lord again to Arjuna about 5,000 years ago. That is the rough estimate of the history of the Gita, according to the Gita itself and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna. It was spoken to the sun god Vivaswan because he is also a Kshatriya and is the father of all Kshatriyas who are descendants of the sun god or the Surya Vamsha Kshatriyas. Because Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This knowledge is apaurusheya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are, without human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not Bhagavad Gita as it is. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that the Lord spoke to the Sun God spoke to his son Manu, and Manu spoke to his son Ikshvaku. Text 2. एवं परंपरा प्राप्तम् इमं राजर्षयो विदुः सकाले नेह महता योगो नष्टः परन्तप. Synonyms. Evam, thus. Parampara, disciplic succession. Praptam, received. Imam, this science. Rajarshayaha, the saintly kings. Viduhu, understood. Saha, that knowledge. Kalena, in the course of time. Iha, in this world. Mahata, by great. Yogaha, the science of one's relationship with the Supreme. Nashtaha, scattered. Parantapa, O Arjuna, subduer of the enemies. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Purport. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demoniac persons who would dissipate its value for one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to re establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord Himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore He declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. This spirit is demoniac because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English as it is received by the Parampara or disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity, but if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. We shall continue in the next session. Thank you for joining. Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Welcome all of you for today's Bhagavad Gita reading session. Let us begin with prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 4 entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Text 3. Sayevayam maya tedya yoga proktah puratanah bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam hyetaduttamam. Synonyms: Saha, the same ancient; Eva, certainly; Ayam, this; Maya, by me; Te, unto you; Adya, today; Yogaha, the science of yoga; Proktaha, spoken; Puratanaha, very old; Bhaktaha, devotee; Asi, you are; Me, my; Sakha, friend; Cha, also; Iti, therefore; Rahasyam, mystery; He, certainly; Etat, this; Uttamam, transcendental. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: The Supreme Personality of Godhead continued. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is told today by me to you because you are my devotee as well as my friend. Therefore, you can understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Purport: There are two classes of men, namely the devotee and the demon. The Lord selected Arjuna as the recipient of this great science, owing to his becoming the devotee of the Lord. But for the demon it is not possible to understand this great mysterious science. There are a number of editions of this great book of knowledge, and some of them have commentaries by the devotees, and some of them have commentaries by the demons. Commentation by the devotees is real, whereas that of the demons is useless. Arjuna accepts Sri Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and any commentary on the Gita following in the footsteps of Arjuna is real devotional service to the cause of this great science. The demoniac, however, concoct something about Krishna and mislead the public and general readers from the path of Krishna's instructions. One should try to follow the disciplic succession from Arjuna and thus be benefited. Text 4. Arjuna Uvacha Aparam Bhavato Janma Param Janma Vivasvataha Katham Etad Vijaniyam Tvamado Proktavaniti. Synonyms: Arjuna Uvacha, Arjuna said, Aparam, junior; Bhavataha, your; Janma, birth; Param, superior; Janma, birth; Vivasvataha, of the sun god; Katham, how; Etat, this; Vijaniyam, shall I understand; Tvam, you; Adav, in the beginning; Proktavan, instructed; Iti, thus. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Arjuna said, the sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? Purport. Arjuna is an accepted devotee of the Lord, so how could he not believe Krishna's words? The fact is that Arjuna is not inquiring for himself, but for those who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or for the demons who do not like the idea that Krishna should be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For them, only Arjuna inquires on this point, as if he were himself not aware of the personality of Godhead or Krishna. As it will be evident from the 10th chapter, Arjuna knew perfectly well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fountainhead of everything, and the last word in transcendence. Of course, Krishna also appeared as the son of Devaki on this earth. How Krishna remained the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, the eternal original person, is very difficult for an ordinary man to understand. Therefore, to clarify this point, Arjuna put this question before Krishna so that he himself could speak authoritatively. That Krishna is the supreme authority is accepted by the whole world, not only at present, but from time immemorial, and the demons alone reject him. Anyway, since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjuna put this question before him in order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons, who always try to distort him in a way understandable to the demons and their followers. It is necessary that everyone, for his own interest, know the signs of Krishna. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. To the demons, such explanations by Krishna himself may appear to be strange because the demons always study Krishna from their own standpoint. But those who are devotees heartily welcome the statements of Krishna when they are spoken by Krishna himself. The devotees will always worship such authoritative statements of Krishna because they are always eager to know more and more about him. The atheists who consider Krishna an ordinary man may in this way come to know that Krishna is superhuman, that he is Sachidananda Vigraha, the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, that he is transcendental, and that he is above the domination of the modes of material nature and above the influence of time and space. A devotee of Krishna's, like Arjuna, is undoubtedly above any misunderstanding of the transcendental position of Krishna. Arjuna's putting this question before the Lord is simply an attempt by the devotee to defy the atheistic attitude of persons who consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being subject to the modes of material nature. Text 5. श्रीभगवानुवाच बहूनि मे व्यतीतानि जन्मानि तव चार्जुन तान्यहं वेद सर्वाणि न त्वं वेत्थ परन्तप. Synonyms. Sri Bhagavanuvacha, the personality of Godhead said, Bahuni, many, may, of mine, Vyatitani, have passed, Janmani, births, Tava, of yours, Cha, and also, Arjuna, O Arjuna, Tani, all those, Aham, I, Veda, do know, Sarvani, all, Na, not, Tvam, yourself, Vetha, no, Parantapa, O subduer of the enemy. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The Blessed Lord said, Many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot. O subduer of the enemy. Purport. In the Brahma Samhita, we have information of many incarnations of the Lord. It is stated there, Advaitamachyutamanadimanantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayavvanam Cha Vedeshu Durlabhamadurlabhamatmabhaktau Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, verse 33. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person, absolute, infallible, without beginning, although expanded into unlimited forms, still the same original, the oldest, and the person always appearing as a fresh youth. Such eternal, blissful, all knowing forms of the Lord are usually understood by the best Vedic scholars, but they are always manifest to pure, unalloyed devotees. It is also stated in Brahma Samhita, Ramadimurtishu kalani yamena tishtan नानावतारमकरोद्भुवनेषु किन्तु कृष्णस्वयं समभवत् परमः पुमान्यो गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि. Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, verse 39. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is always situated in various incarnations, such as Rama, Nrsimha, and many sub incarnations as well, but who is the original personality of Godhead, known as Krishna, and who incarnates personally also. In the Vedas also it is said that the Lord, although one without a second, nevertheless manifests himself in innumerable forms. He is like the Vaidurya stone which changes color yet still remains one. All those multi forms are understood by the pure, unalloyed devotees, but not by a simple study of the Vedas. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhaktau. Devotees like Arjuna are constant companions of the Lord, and whenever the Lord incarnates, the associate devotees also incarnate in order to serve the Lord in different capacities. Arjuna is one of these devotees, and in this verse it is understood that some millions of years ago, when Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god Vivaswan, Arjuna, in a different capacity, was also present. But the difference between the Lord and Arjuna is that the Lord remembered the incidents, whereas whereas Arjuna could not remember. That is the difference between the part and parcel living entity and the Supreme Lord. Although Arjuna is addressed herein as the mighty hero who could subdue the enemies, he is unable to recall what had happened in his various past births. Therefore, a living entity, however great he may be in the material estimation, can never equal the Supreme Lord. Anyone who is a constant companion of the Lord is certainly a liberated person, but he cannot be equal to the Lord. The Lord is described in the Brahma Samhita as infallible, Achyuta, which means that he never forgets himself, even though he is in material contact. Therefore, the Lord and the living entity can never be equal in all respects, even if the living entity is as liberated as Arjuna. Although Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord, he sometimes forgets the nature of the Lord, but by the divine grace, a devotee can at once understand the infallible condition of the Lord, whereas a non devotee or a demon cannot understand this transcendental nature. Consequently, these descriptions in the Gita cannot be understood by demonic brains. Krishna remembered acts which were performed by him millions of years before, but Arjuna could not, despite the fact that both Krishna and Arjuna are eternal in nature. We may also note herein that a living entity forgets everything due to his change of body, but the Lord remembers because he does not change his Satchidananda body. He is Advaita, which means there is no distinction between his body and himself. Everything in relation to him is spirit, whereas the conditioned soul is different from his material body. And because the Lord's body and the self are identical, his position is always different from the ordinary living entity, even when he descends to the material platform. The demons cannot adjust themselves to this transcendental nature of the Lord, as the Lord explains in the following verse. Text 6. Ajopi sannavyayatma bhutanamishvaropi san prakritim swamadhisthaya sambhavamyatmamayaya. Synonyms: Ajaha, unborn; Api, although; San, being so; Avyaya, without deterioration; Atma, body; Bhutanam, all those who are born; Ishvaraha, the Supreme Lord; Api, although; San, being so; Prakritim, transcendental form; Swam, of myself; Adhisthaya, being so situated; Sambhavami, I do incarnate; Atmamayaya, by my internal energy. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all sentient beings, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Purport: The Lord has spoken about the peculiarity of his birth. Although he may appear like an ordinary person, he remembers everything of his many, many past births, whereas a common man cannot remember what he has done even a few hours before. If someone is asked what he did exactly at the same time one day earlier, it would be very difficult for a common man to answer immediately. He would surely have to dredge his memory to recall what he was doing exactly at the same time one day before. And yet, men often dare claim to be God or Krishna. One should not be misled by such meaningless claims. Then again, the Lord explains his Prakriti or his form. Prakriti means nature as well as Swarupa or one's own form. The Lord says that he appears in his own body. He does not change his body as the common living entity changes from one body to another. The conditioned soul may have one kind of body in the present birth, but he has a different body in the next birth. In the material world, the living entity has no fixed body, but transmigrates from one body to another. The Lord, however, does not do so. Whenever he appears, he does so in the same original body by his internal potency. In other words, Krishna appears in this material world in his original eternal form with two hands holding a flute. He appears exactly in his eternal body, uncontaminated by this material world. Although he appears in the same transcendental body and is the Lord of the universe, it still appears that he takes his birth like an ordinary living entity. Despite the fact Lord Krishna grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth, astonishingly enough, he never ages beyond youth. At the time of the Battle of Kurukshetra, he had many grandchildren at home, or in other words, he had sufficiently aged by material calculations. Still, he looked just like a young man, 20 or 25 years old. We never see a picture of Krishna in old age because he never grows old like us, although he is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present, and future. Neither his body nor his intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. Therefore, it is clear that, in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changeless in his transcendental body and intelligence. Factually, his appearance and disappearance are like the sun's rising, moving before us, and then disappearing from our eyesight. When the sun is out of sight, we think that the sun is set, and when the sun is before our eyes, we think that the sun is on the horizon. Actually, the sun is always in its fixed position, but owing to our defective, insufficient senses, we calculate the appearance and disappearance of the sun in the sky. And because his appearance and disappearance are completely different from that of any ordinary common living entity, it is evident that he is eternal, blissful knowledge by his internal potency, and he is never contaminated by material nature. The Vedas also confirm that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unborn, yet he still appears to take his birth in multi manifestations. The Vedic supplementary literatures also confirm that even though the Lord appears to be taking his birth, he is still without change of body. In the Bhagavatam, he appears before his mother as Narayana with four hands and the decorations of the six kinds of full opulences. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy, according to the Vishwakosha dictionary. The Lord is conscious of all his previous appearances and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. He is the Lord of all living entities because he performs wonderful and superhuman activities while he is on this earth. Therefore, the Lord is always the same absolute truth and is without differentiation between his form and self or between his quality and body. A question may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in this world. This is explained in the next verse. Text 7. यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्. Synonyms. Yada, whenever. Yada, wherever. He, certainly. Dharmasya, of religion. Glanihi, discrepancies. Bhavati, manifested. Becomes Bharata, O descendant of Bharata. Abhyuthanam, predominance. Adharmasya, of irreligion. Tada, at that time. Atmanam, self. Srijami, manifest. Aham, I. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Purport. The word Srijami is significant herein. Srijami cannot be used in the sense of creation, because, according to the previous verse, there is no creation of the Lord's form or body, since all of the forms are eternally existent. Therefore, Srijami means that the Lord manifests himself as he is. Although the Lord appears on schedule, namely at the end of Dwapar Yuga of the 28th millennium of the 8th Manu in one day of Brahma, still he has no obligation to adhere to such rules and regulations because he is completely free to act in many ways at his will. He therefore appears by his own will whenever there is a predominance of irreligiosity and a disappearance of true religion. Principles of religion are laid down in the Vedas, and any discrepancy in the matter of properly executing the rules of the Vedas makes one irreligious. In the Bhagavatam, it is stated that such principles are the laws of the Lord. Only the Lord can manufacture a system of religion. The Vedas are also accepted as originally spoken by the Lord Himself to Brahma from within his heart. Therefore, the principles of dharma or religion are the direct orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. These principles are clearly indicated throughout the Bhagavad Gita. The purpose of the Vedas is to establish such principles under the order of the Supreme Lord, and the Lord directly orders at the end of the Gita that the highest principle of religion is to surrender unto Him only and nothing more. The Vedic principles push one towards complete surrender unto Him, and whenever such principles are disturbed by the demoniac, the Lord appears. From the Bhagavatam, we understand that Lord Buddha is the incarnation of Krishna who appeared when materialism was rampant and materialists were using the pretext of the authority of the Vedas. Although there are certain restrictive rules and regulations regarding animal sacrifice for particular purposes in the Vedas, people of demoniac tendency still took to animal sacrifice without reference to the Vedic principles. Lord Buddha appeared to stop this nonsense and to establish the Vedic principles of non-violence. Therefore, each and every avatara or incarnation of the Lord has a particular mission, and they are all described in the revealed scriptures. No one should be accepted as an avatara unless he is referred to by scriptures. It is not a fact that the Lord appears only on Indian soil. He can advent himself and anywhere and everywhere, and whenever he desires to appear. In each and every incarnation, he speaks as much about religion as can be understood by the particular people under their particular circumstances. But the mission is the same, to lead people to God consciousness and obedience to the principles of religion. Sometimes he descends personally, and sometimes he sends his bona fide representative in the form of his son or servant, or himself in some disguised form. The principles of the Bhagavad Gita were spoken to Arjuna, and, for that matter, to other highly elevated persons, because he was highly advanced compared to ordinary persons in other parts of the world. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is a mathematical principle That is true both in the beginners arithmetic class and in the advanced class as well. Still, there are higher and lower mathematics. In all incarnations of the Lord, therefore, the same principles are taught, but they appear to be higher and lower in varied circumstances. The higher principles of religion begin with the acceptance of the four orders and the four statuses of social life, as will be explained later. The whole purpose of the mission of incarnations is to arouse Krishna consciousness everywhere. Such consciousness is manifest and non manifest only under different circumstances. We shall continue to read tomorrow. Thank you for joining. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Vishwa Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu.
Welcome all of you for today's Bhagavad Gita reading session. Let us begin with prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 4 entitled The Transcendental Knowledge. Text 8. परित्राणाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतां धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे. Synonyms: Paritranaya, for the deliverance, Sadhunam, of the devotees, Vinashaya, for the annihilation, Cha, also, Dushkritam, of the miscreants, Dharma, principles of religion, Samsthapana Arthaya, to re-establish, Sambhavami, I do appear, Yuge, millennium, Yuge, after millennium. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, in order to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I advent myself millennium after millennium. Purport: According to Bhagavad Gita, a sadhu or a holy man is a man in Krishna consciousness. A person may appear to be irreligious, but if he has the qualifications of Krishna consciousness wholly and fully, he is to be understood to be a sadhu. And dushkritam applies to one who doesn't care for Krishna consciousness. Such miscreants or dushkritam are described as foolish and the lowest of mankind, even though they may be decorated with mundane education, whereas another person who is 100% engaged in Krishna consciousness is accepted as sadhu, even though such a person may neither be learned nor well cultured. As far as the atheistic are concerned, it is not necessary for the Supreme Lord to appear as He is to destroy them, as He did with the demons Ravana and Kamsa. The Lord has many agents who are quite competent to vanquish demons. But the Lord especially descends to appease his unalloyed devotees, who are always harassed by the demoniac. The demon harasses the devotee, even though the latter may happen to be his kin. Although Prahlad Maharaj was the son of Hiranyakashipu, he was nonetheless persecuted by his father. Although Devaki, the mother of Krishna, was the sister of Kamsa, she and her husband Vasudeva were persecuted only because Krishna was to be born of them. So, Lord Krishna appeared primarily to deliver Devaki rather than kill Kamsa, but both were performed simultaneously. Therefore, it is said here that to deliver the devotee and vanquish the demon miscreants, the Lord appears in different incarnations. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Krishnadas Kaviraj, the following verses summarize these principles of incarnation. सृष्टि हेतु एई मूर्ति प्रपंचे अवतारे से ईश्वर मूर्ति अवतार नाम धरे मायातीत परव्योमे सवार अवस्थान विश्वे अवतारी धरे अवतार नामा. The avatara or incarnation of Godhead descends from the kingdom of God for material manifestation, and the particular form of the personality of Godhead who so descends is called an incarnation or avatara. Such incarnations are situated in the spiritual world, the kingdom of God. When they descend to the material creation, they assume the name avatara. There are various kinds of avatars, such as Purusha avatars, Guna avatars, Leela avatars, Shaktiyavesha avatars, Manvantara avatars, and Yuga avatars, all appearing on schedule all over the universe. But Lord Krishna is the primeval Lord, the fountainhead of all avatars. Lord Sri Krishna descends for the specific purposes of mitigating the anxieties of the pure devotees who are very anxious to see him in his original Vrindavan pastimes. Therefore, the prime purpose of the Krishna Avatara is to satisfy his unalloyed devotees. The Lord says that he incarnates himself in every millennium. This indicates that he incarnates also in the age of Kali. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the incarnation in the age of Kali is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who spread the worship of Krishna by the Sankirtana movement or the congregational chanting of the holy names and spread Krishna consciousness throughout India. He predicted that this culture of Sankirtana would be broadcast all over the world, from town to town and village to village. Lord Chaitanya, as the incarnation of Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is described secretly but not directly in the confidential parts of the revealed scriptures, such as the Upanishads, Mahabharata, Bhagavatam, etc. The devotees of Lord Krishna are much attracted by the Sankirtana movement of Lord Chaitanya. This avatara of the Lord does not kill the miscreants, but delivers them by the causeless mercy of the Lord. Text 9. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tatvatah त्यक्त्वा देहं पुनर्जन्म नैति मामेति सोऽर्जुन. Synonyms: Janma, birth; Karma, work; Cha, also; Me, of mine; Divyam, transcendental; Evam, like this; Yaha, anyone who; Veti, knows; Tattvataha, in reality; Tyaktva, leaving aside; Deham, this body; Punaha, again; Janma, birth; Na, never;
eti does attain, mam unto me, eti does attain, saha he, Arjuna, O Arjuna. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Purport: the Lord's descent from his transcendental abode is already explained in the sixth verse. One who can understand the truth of the appearance of the personality of Godhead is already liberated from material bondage, and therefore he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting this present material body. Such liberation of the living entity from material bondage is not at all easy. The impersonalists and the yogis attain liberation only after much trouble and and many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahma Jyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is the risk of returning again to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body and does not run the risk of returning again to this material world. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the Lord has many forms and incarnations. Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam. Although there are many transcendental forms of the Lord, they are still one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. One has to understand this fact with conviction, although it is incomprehensible to mundane scholars and empiric philosophers. As stated in the Vedas, Eko Devo Nitya Leelanurapto Bhaktavyapi Hridyantaratma. The one Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternally engaged in many transcendental forms in relationships with his unalloyed devotees. This Vedic version is confirmed in this verse of the Gita personally by the Lord. He who accepts this truth on the strength of the authority of the Vedas and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and who does not waste time in philosophical speculations, attains the highest perfectional stage of liberation. Simply by accepting this truth on faith, one can, without a doubt, attain liberation. The Vedic version, Tattvamasi, is actually applied in this case. Anyone who understands Lord Krishna to be the Supreme, or who says unto the Lord, you are the Supreme, you are the same Supreme Brahman, the personality of Godhead, is certainly liberated instantly, and consequently, his entrance into the transcendental association of the Lord is guaranteed. In other words, such a faithful devotee of the Lord attains perfection, and this is confirmed by the following Vedic assertion: Tameva vidittvati amrityumeti nanyah pantha vidyate ayanaya. One can attain the perfect stage of liberation from birth and death simply by knowing the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no alternative because anyone who does not understand Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is surely in the mode of ignorance. Consequently, he will not attain salvation simply, so to speak, by licking the outer surface of the bottle of honey or by interpreting the Bhagavad Gita according to mundane scholarship. Such empiric philosophers may assume very important roles in the material world, but they are not necessarily eligible for liberation. Such puffed up mundane scholars have to wait for the causeless mercy of the devotee of the Lord. One should therefore cultivate Krishna consciousness with faith and knowledge, and in this way attain perfection. Text 10. वीतरागभयक्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूता मद्भावमागताः. Synonyms: Vita, freed from; Raga, attachment; Bhaya, fear; Krodhaha, anger; Matmaya, fully in me; Mam, unto me; Upashritaha, being fully situated; Bahavaha, many; Jnana, knowledge; Tapasa, by penance; Putaha, being purified; Matbhavam, transcendental love for me; Agataha, attained. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me, and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport: As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal, and because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all, being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation. They become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of attachment to the material life: negligence of spiritual life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that underlies the frustration of life. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of the devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of Godhead. According to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the signs of devotional service, आदौ श्रद्धा ततः साधु संगो अथ भजन क्रिया ततो अनर्थ निवृत्तिः स्यात् ततो निष्ठा रुचिस्ततः अथासक्तिस्ततो भावः ततः प्रेमाभ्यु अभ्युदञ्चति साधकानाम् अयं प्रेम्णः प्रादुर्भावे भवेत् क्रमः. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations resulting from void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. Text 11. ये यथा मां प्रपद्यन्ते तांस्तथैव भजाम्यहम् मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्या पार्थ सर्वशः. Synonyms: Ye, all of them, yatha, as, mam, unto me, prapadyante, surrender, tan, unto them, tatha, so, eva, certainly, bhajami, do I reward, aham, I, mama, my, vartma, path, anuvartante, do follow, manushyaha, all men, partha, O son of Pritha, sarvashaha, in all respects. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: All of them, as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Purport: Everyone is searching for Krishna in the different aspects of his manifestations. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is partially realized in his impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence and as the all pervading Supersoul dwelling within everything, including the particles of atoms. But Krishna is only fully realized by his pure devotees. Consequently, Krishna is the object of everyone's realization, and thus anyone and everyone is satisfied according to one's desire to have him. In the transcendental world also, Krishna reciprocates with his pure devotees in the transcendental attitude just as the devotee wants him. One devotee may want Krishna as Supreme Master, another as his personal friend, another as his son, and still another as his lover. Krishna rewards all the devotees equally according to their different intensities of love for him. In the material world, the same reciprocations of feelings are there, and they are equally exchanged by the Lord with the different types of worshippers. The pure devotees, both here and in the transcendental abode, associate with him in person and are able to render personal service to the Lord and thus derive transcendental bliss in his loving service. As for those who are impersonalists and who want to commit spiritual suicide by annihilating the individual existence of the living entity, Krishna helps also by absorbing them into his effulgence. Such impersonalists do not agree to accept the eternal, blissful personality of Godhead. Consequently, they cannot relish the bliss of transcendental personal service to the Lord, having extinguished their individuality. Some of them, who are not situated even in the impersonal existence, return to this material field to exhibit their dormant desires for activities. They are not admitted in the, they are not admitted in the spiritual planets, but they are again given a chance to act on the material planets. For those who are fruitive workers, the Lord awards the desired results of their prescribed duties as the Yagneshwara, and those who are yogis seeking mystic powers are awarded such powers. In other words, everyone is dependent for success upon His mercy alone, and all kinds of spiritual processes are but different degrees of success on the same path. Unless, therefore, one comes to the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness, all attempts remain imperfect, as is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. अकामः सर्वकामो वा मोक्षकाम उदारधीः तीव्रेण भक्तियोगेन यजेत पुरुषं परम्. Whether one is without desire, the condition of the devotees, or is desirous of all fruitive results, or is after liberation, one should, with all efforts, try to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead for complete perfection, culminating in Krishna consciousness. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, Verse 10. We shall continue to read in the next session. Thank you for your valuable time. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Right.
Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Welcome all of you for today's Bhagavad Gita reading session. Let us begin with prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Vaishnavi Sutakriti Shri Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 4 entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Text 12. काङ्क्षतः कर्मणां सिद्धिं यजन्त इह देवताः क्षिप्रं हि मानुषे लोके सिद्धिर्भवति कर्मजा. Synonyms: Kangshatah, desiring; Karmanam, of fruitive activities; Siddhim, perfection; Yajante, worship by sacrifices; Iha, in the material world; Devataha, the demigods; Kshipram, very quickly; He, certainly; Manushe, in human society; Loke, within this world; Siddhihi bhavati, becomes successful; Karmaja, the fruitive worker. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Men in this world desire success in fruitive activities, and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruitive work in this world. Purport: There is a great misconception about the gods or demigods of this material world, and men of less intelligence, although passing as great scholars, take these demigods to be various forms of the Supreme Lord. Actually, the demigods are not different forms of God, but they are God's different parts and parcels. God is one, and the parts and parcels are many. The Vedas say Nityo Nityanam. God is one. Ishvaraha Paramaha Krishnaha. The Supreme God is one, Krishna, and the demigods are delegated with powers to manage the material world. These demigods are all living entities, Nityanam, with different grades of material power. They cannot be equal to the Supreme God, Narayana, Vishnu, or Krishna. Anyone who thinks that God and the demigods are on the same level is called an atheist or Pashandi. Even the great demigods like Brahma and Shiva cannot be compared to the Supreme Lord. In fact, the Lord is worshipped by demigods such as Brahma and Shiva. Shiva Virinchi Notam. Yet, curiously enough, there are many human leaders who are worshipped by foolish men under the misunderstanding of anthropomorphism or zoomorphism. Iha Devataha denotes a powerful man or demigod of this material world. But Narayana, Vishnu, or Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, does not belong to this world. He is above or transcendental to material creation. Even Sripada Shankaracharya, the leader of the impersonalists, maintains that Narayana or Krishna is beyond this material creation. However, foolish people, Hrit Anjana, worship the demigods because they want immediate results. They get the results, but do not know that results so obtained are temporary and are meant for less intelligent persons. The intelligent person is in Krishna consciousness and he has no need to worship the paltry demigods for some immediate temporary benefit. The demigods of this material world, as well as their worshippers, will vanish with the annihilation of this material world. The boons of the demigods are material and temporary. Both the material worlds and their inhabitants, including the demigods and their worshippers, are bubbles in the cosmic ocean. In this world, however, human society is mad after temporary things, such as the material opulence of possessing land, family, and enjoyable paraphernalia. To achieve such temporary things, they worship the demigods or powerful men in human society. If a man gets ministership in the government by worshipping a political leader, he considers that he has achieved a great boon. All of them are therefore kowtowing to the so called leaders or big guns in order to achieve temporary boons, and they indeed achieve such things. Such foolish men are not interested in Krishna consciousness for the permanent solution to the hardships of material existence. They are all after sense enjoyment, and to get a little facility for sense enjoyment, they are attracted to worship empowered living entities known as demigods. This verse indicates that people are rarely interested in Krishna consciousness, they are mostly interested in material enjoyment, and therefore they worship some powerful living entity. Text 13. चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्मविभागशः तस्य कर्तारमपि मां विद्य कर्तारमव्ययम्. Synonyms: Chaturvarnyam, the four divisions of human society. Maya, by me. Srishtam, created. Guna, quality. Karma, work. Vibhagashaha, in terms of division. Tasya, of that. Kartaram, the father. Api, although. Mam, me. Vidhi, you may know. Akartaram, as the non-doer. Avyayam, being unchangeable. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: according to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the four divisions of human society were created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. Purport: the Lord is the creator of everything. Everything is born of Him, everything is sustained by Him, and everything, after annihilation, rests in Him. He is therefore the creator of the four divisions of the social order, beginning with the intelligent class of men, technically called Brahmanas, due to their being situated in the mode of goodness. Next is the administrative class, technically called the Kshatriyas, due to their being situated in the mode of passion. The mercantile men, called the Vaishyas, are situated in the mixed modes of passion and ignorance, and the Shudras, or laborer class, are situated in the ignorant mode of material nature. In spite of his creating the four divisions of human society, Lord Krishna does not belong to any of these divisions because he is not one of the conditioned souls, a section of whom form human society. Human society is similar to any other animal society, but to elevate men from the animal status, the above mentioned divisions are created by the Lord for the systematic development of Krishna consciousness. The tendency of a particular man toward work is determined by the modes of material nature which he has acquired. Such symptoms of life, according to different modes of material nature, are described in the 18th chapter of this book. A person in Krishna consciousness, however, is above even the Brahmanas, because a Brahmana, by quality, is supposed to know about Brahman, the supreme absolute truth. Most of them approach the impersonal Brahman manifestation of Lord Krishna, but only a man who transcends the limited knowledge of a Brahmana and reaches the knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, becomes a person in Krishna consciousness
or in other words, a Vaishnava. Krishna consciousness includes knowledge of all different plenary expansions of Krishna, namely Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, etc. However, as Krishna is transcendental to this system of the four divisions of human society, a person in Krishna consciousness is also transcendental to all divisions of human society, whether we consider the divisions of community, nation, or species. Text 14. Namam karmani limpanti name karma phale spruha iti mam yobhijanati karma bhirna sabadhyate. Synonyms. Na, never. Mam, unto me, karmani, all kinds of work, limpanti, do affect, na, nor, me, my, karma phale, in fruitive action, spruha, aspiration, iti, thus, mam, unto me, yaha, one who, abhijanati, does know, karma bhihi, by the reaction of such work, na, never does. Saha, he. Badhyate, become entangled. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. Purport. As there are constitutional laws in the material world stating that the king can do no wrong, or that the king is not subject to the state laws. Similarly, the Lord, although he is the creator of this material world, is not affected by the activities of the material world. He creates and remains aloof from the creation, whereas the living entities are entangled in the fruitive results of material activities because of their propensity for lording it over material resources. The proprietor of an establishment is not responsible for the right and wrong activities of the workers, but the workers are themselves responsible. The living entities are engaged in their respective activities of sense gratification, and these activities are not ordained by the Lord. For advancement of sense gratification, the living entities are engaged in the work of this world, and they aspire to heavenly happiness after death. The Lord, being full in himself, has no attraction for so called heavenly happiness. The heavenly demigods are only his engaged servants. The proprietor never desires the low grade happiness such as the workers may desire. He is aloof from the material actions and reactions. For example, the rains are not responsible for different types of vegetation that appear on the earth, although without such rains there is no possibility of vegetative growth. Vedic Smriti confirms this fact as follows. निमित्तमात्रम् एवासौ सृज्यानां सर्गकर्मणि कारणीभूता यतो वै सृज्य शक्तयः. In the material creations, the Lord is only the supreme cause. The immediate cause is material nature by which the cosmic manifestation is visible. The created beings are of many varieties, such as the demigods, human beings, and lower animals, and all of them are subject to the reactions of their past good or bad activities. The Lord only gives them the proper facilities for such activities and the regulations of the modes of nature, but He is never responsible for their past and present activities. In the Vedanta Sutras, it is confirmed that the Lord is never partial to any living entity. The living entity is responsible for his own acts, The Lord only gives him facilities through the agency of material nature, the external energy. Anyone who is fully conversant with all the intricacies of this law of nature or this law of karma or fruitive activities does not become affected by the results of his activities. In other words, the person who understands this transcendental nature of the Lord is an experienced man in Krishna consciousness, and thus he is never subjected to the laws of karma. One who does not know the transcendental nature of the Lord and who thinks that the activities of the Lord are aimed at fruitive results, as are the activities of the ordinary living entities, certainly becomes entangled himself in fruitive action. But one who knows the supreme truth is a liberated soul fixed in Krishna consciousness. Text 15. एवं ज्ञात्वा कृतं कर्म पूर्वैरपि मुमुक्षुभिः कुरु कर्मैव तस्मात् त्वं पूर्वतरं कृतम्. Synonyms: evam, thus; jnatva, knowing well; kritam, performed; karma, work; purvaihi, by past authorities; api, although; mumukshubhihi, who attained liberation; kuru, just perform; karma, prescribed duty; eva, certainly; tasmat, therefore; tvam, you; purvaihi, by the predecessors; purvataram, ancient predecessors; kritam, as performed. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: all the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding and so attained liberation. Therefore, as the ancients, you should perform your duty in this divine consciousness. Purport: there are two classes of men. Some of them are full of polluted material things within their hearts, and some of them are materially free. Krishna consciousness is equally beneficial for both of these persons. Those who are full of dirty things can take to the line of Krishna consciousness for a gradual cleansing process following the regulative principles of devotional service. Those who are already cleansed of the impurities may continue to act in the same Krishna consciousness so that others may follow their exemplary activities and thereby be benefited. Foolish persons or neophytes in Krishna consciousness often want to retire from activities without having knowledge of Krishna consciousness. Arjuna's desire to retire from activities on the battlefield was not approved by the Lord. One need only know how to act. To retire from the activities of Krishna consciousness and to sit aloof, making a show of Krishna consciousness, is less important than actually engaging in the field of activities for the sake of Krishna. Arjuna is here advised to act in Krishna consciousness, following in the footsteps of the Lord's previous disciples, such as the sun god Vivaswan, as mentioned herein before. The Supreme Lord knows all his past activities, as well as those of persons who acted in Krishna consciousness in the past. Therefore, he recommends the acts of the sun god who learned this art from the Lord some millions of years before. All such students of Lord Krishna are mentioned here as past liberated persons engaged in the discharge of duties allotted by Krishna. Text 16. Kim karma kima karmeti kavayopyatra mohitaha tatte karma pravakshyami yajñatva mokshase shubhat. Synonyms: Kim, what is? Karma, action. Kim, what is. Akarma, inaction. Iti, thus. Kavayaha, the intelligent. Api, also. Atra, in this matter. Mohitaha, bewildered. Tat, that. Te, unto you. Karma, work. Pravakshyami, I shall explain. Tat, which. Jnatva, knowing. Mokshyase, be liberated. Ashubhat, from ill fortune. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all sins. Purport. Action in Krishna consciousness has to be executed in accord with the examples of previous bona fide devotees. This is recommended in the 15th verse. Why such action should not be independent will be explained in the text to follow. To act in Krishna consciousness, one has to follow the leadership of authorized persons who are in a line of disciplic succession as explained in the beginning of this chapter. The system of Krishna consciousness was first narrated to the sun god. The sun god explained it to his son Manu. Manu explained it to his son Ikshvaku, and the system is current on this earth from that very remote time. Therefore, one has to follow in the footsteps of previous authorities in the line of disciplic succession. Otherwise, even the most intelligent men will be bewildered regarding the standard actions of Krishna consciousness. For this reason, the Lord decided to instruct Arjuna in Krishna consciousness directly. Because of the direct instruction of the Lord, sorry, because of the direct instruction of the Lord to Arjuna, anyone who follows in the footsteps of Arjuna is certainly not bewildered. It is said that one cannot ascertain the ways of religion simply by imperfect experimental knowledge. Actually, the principles of religion can only be laid down by the Lord Himself. Dharmam hi sakshat bhagavat pranitam. No one can manufacture a religious principle by imperfect speculation. One must follow in the footsteps of great authorities like Brahma, Shiva, Narada, Manu, Kumara, Kapila, Prahlada, Bhishma, Shukadev Goswami, Yamaraja, Janaka, etc. By mental speculation, one cannot ascertain what is religion or self realization. Therefore, out of causeless mercy to his devotees, the Lord explains directly to Arjuna what action is and what inaction is. Only action performed in Krishna consciousness can deliver a person from the entanglement of material existence. Text 17. कर्मणो हि अपि बोद्धव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोद्धव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः. Synonyms. Karmanaha, working order. He, certainly. Api, also. Bodhavyam, should be understood. Bodhavyam, to be understood. Cha, also. Vikarmanaha, forbidden work. Akarmanaha, inaction. Cha, also. Bodhavyam, should be understood. Gahana, very difficult. Karmanaha, working order. Gatihi, to enter into. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. Purport. If one is serious about liberation from material bondage, one has to understand the distinctions between action, inaction, and unauthorized actions. One has to apply oneself to such an analysis of action, reaction, and perverted actions because it is a very difficult subject matter. To understand Krishna consciousness and action according to the modes, one has to learn one's relationship with the Supreme. That is, one who has learned perfectly knows that every living entity is the eternal servitor of the Lord, and that consequently one has to act in Krishna consciousness. The entire Bhagavad Gita is directed toward this conclusion. Any other conclusions against this consciousness and its attendant reactions are vikarmas or prohibitive actions. To understand all this, one has to associate with authorities in Krishna consciousness and learn the secret from them. This is as good as learning from the Lord directly. Otherwise, even the most intelligent person will be bewildered. Text 18. कर्मण्यकर्म यः पश्येद कर्मणि च कर्म यः स बुद्धिमान् मनुष्येषु स युक्तः कृत्स्नकर्मकृत्. Synonyms: Karmani in action, akarma inaction, yaha one who, pashyet observes, akarmani in action, in inaction, cha also, karma fruitive action, yaha one who, saha he, buddhiman is intelligent, manushyeshu in human society, saha he, yuktaha is in the transcendental position, krishna karmakrit although engaged in all activities. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: one who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Purport: a person acting in Krishna consciousness is naturally free from the bonds of karma. His activities are all performed for Krishna. Therefore, he does not enjoy or suffer any of the effects of work. Consequently, he is intelligent in human society, even though he is engaged in all sorts of activities for Krishna. Akarma means without reaction to work. The impersonalist ceases fruitive activities out of fear so that the resultant action may not be a stumbling block on the path of self realization, but the personalist knows rightly his position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness. Because everything is done for Krishna, he enjoys only transcendental happiness in the discharge of his this service. Those who are engaged in this process are known to be without desire for personal sense gratification. The sense of eternal servitorship to Krishna makes one immune to all sorts of reactionary elements of work. Let us continue to read in the next session. Thank you very much for joining. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Vishwa Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Welcome all of you for today's Bhagavad Gita reading session. Let us begin with prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 4 entitled Transcendental Knowledge. Text 19. Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjitaha ज्ञान ज्ञानाग्निदग्धकर्माणं तमाहुः पंडितं बुधाः. Synonyms: Yasya, one whose, Sarve, all sorts of, Samarambhaha, in all attempts, Kama, desire for sense gratification, Sankalpa, determination, Varjitaha, are devoid of, Jnana, of perfect knowledge, Agni, fire, Dagdha, being burnt by, Karmanam, the performer, Tam, him, Ahuhu, declare, Panditam, learned, Budhaha, those who know. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every act is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker whose fruitive action is burnt up by the fire of perfect knowledge. Text Purport: Only only a person in full knowledge can understand the activities of a person in Krishna consciousness. Because the person in Krishna consciousness is devoid of all kinds of sense gratificatory propensities, it is to be understood that he has burned up the reactions of his work by perfect knowledge of his constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is actually learned who has attained to such perfection of knowledge. Development of this knowledge of the eternal servitorship of the Lord is compared to fire. Such a fire, once kindled, can burn up all kinds of reactions to work. Text 20. त्यक्त्वा कर्मफलासङ्गं नित्यतृप्तो निराश्रयः कर्मण्यभिप्रवृत्तोऽपि नैव किञ्चित् करोति सः. Synonyms: Tyaktva, having given up, karma asangam, attachment for fruitive results, nitya, always, triptaha, being satisfied, nirashrayaha, without any center, without any shelter, karmani, in activity, abhipravrittaha, being fully engaged, api, in spite of, na, does not, eva, certainly, kinchit, anything, karoti, do, saha, he. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. Purport: This freedom from the bondage of actions is possible only in Krishna consciousness when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. He is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. He does his duty to his best ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is the sign of akarma, or actions without fruitive reactions. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness, is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of vikarma, as explained herein before. Text 21. निराशीर्यत चित्तात्मा त्यक्त सर्वपरिग्रहः शारीरं केवलं कर्म कुर्वन्नाप्नोति किल्बिषम्. Synonyms: Nirashihi, without desire for the results. Yata, controlled. Chitta Atma, mind and intelligence. Tyakta, giving up. Sarva, all. Parigraha, sense of proprietorship over all possessions. Shariram, in keeping body and soul together. Kevalam, only. Karma, work. Kurvan, doing so. Na, never. Apnoti, does not acquire. Kilbisham, sinful reactions. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. Purport: A Krishna conscious man, a Krishna conscious person, does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme, and therefore the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his by choice, but is chosen for him by the Supreme, and is done only through his agency. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, similarly, a Krishna conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna conscious person, fully engaged in self realization, has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not, therefore, become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. Text 22.
यदृच्छालाभसन्तुष्टो द्वन्द्वातीतो विमत्सरः समसिद्धावसिद्धौ च कृत्वापि न निबध्यते. Synonyms. Yadricha, out of its own accord. Labha, gain. Santushtaha, satisfied. Dvandva, duality. Atitaha, surpassed. Vimatsaraha, free from envy. Samaha, steady. Siddhau, in success. Asiddhau, failure. Cha, also. Kritva, doing. Api, although. Na, never. Nibadhyate is affected. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady both in success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Purport. A Krishna conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as is in his power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge. Text 23. गतसङ्गस्य मुक्तस्य ज्ञानावस्थितचेतसः यज्ञयाचरतः कर्म समग्रं प्रविलीयते. Synonyms. Gata Sangasya, unattached to the modes of material nature. Muktasya, of the liberated. Jnana Avasthita, situated in transcendence. Chetasaha, of such wisdom. Yajnaya, for the sake of Yajna or Krishna. Acharataha, so acting. Karma, work. Samagram, in total. Praviliyate, merges entirely. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Purport. Becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is freed from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminations of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices, because sacrifice involves satisfying the Supreme Person, Krishna. The resultant reactions to all such work certainly merge into transcendence
and one does not suffer material effects. Text 24. Brahmarpanam brahmahavirbrahmagno brahmanahutam brahmaiva tena gantavyam brahma karma samadhina. Synonyms: Brahma, spiritual nature; Arpanam, contribution; Brahma, the supreme; Havihi, butter; Brahma, spiritual; Agnau, in the fire of consummation; Brahmana, by the spirit soul; Hutam, offered; Brahma, spiritual kingdom; Eva, certainly; Tena, by him; Gantavyam, to be reached; Brahma, spiritual; Karma, activities; Samadhina, by complete absorption. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Purport: how activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness, as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. Brahman means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyoti, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyoti, but when the Jyoti is covered by illusion or Maya or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together Brahman, or the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the Absolute Truth, regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the Absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the Absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. Text 25. दैवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनः पर्युपासते ब्रह्माज्ञौ अपरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति. Synonyms: Daivam, in worshipping the demigods; Eva, like this; Apare, some; Yajnam, sacrifices; Yoginaha, the mystics; Paryupasate, worship perfectly; Brahma, the absolute truth; Agnau, in the fire of; Apare, others; Yajnam, sacrifice; Yajnena, by sacrifice; Eva, thus; Upajuhvati, worship. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some of them offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Purport: As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or a first class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories. Such different categories of sacrifice by different types of performers only superficially demark varieties of sacrifice. Factual sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is also known as Yajna. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely, sacrifice of worldly possessions and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Those who are in Krishna consciousness sacrifice all material possessions for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, while others who want some temporary material happiness sacrifice their material possessions to satisfy demigods such as Indra, the sun god, etc., and others who are impersonalists sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of impersonal Brahman. The demigods are powerful living entities appointed by the Supreme Lord for the maintenance and supervision of all material functions, like the heating, watering, and lighting of the universe. Those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifices according to the rituals. They are called Ishvaravadi, or believers in many gods. But others, who worship the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth and regard the forms of the demigods as temporary, sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire and thus end their individual existences by merging into the existence of the Supreme. Such impersonalists spend their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. In other words, the fruitive workers sacrifice their material possessions for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonalists
sacrifices his material designations with a view to merge into the existence of the Supreme. For the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. The Krishna conscious person, like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions, as well as his own self, everything is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus, he is the first class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. Text 26. श्रोत्रादीनीन्द्रियाण्यन्ये सम्याग्नीषु सम्याग्नीषु जुह्वति संयमाग्निषु जुह्वति शब्दादीन् विषयानन्य इन्द्रियाग्निषु जुह्वति. Synonyms: Shrotra adini, hearing process; Indriyani, senses; Anye, others; Samyama, of restraint; Agnishu, in the fire; Juhvati, offers; Shabda adin, sound, vibration, etc. Vishayan, objects of sense gratification; Anye, others; Indriya, of sense organs; Agnishu, in the fire; Juhvati, sacrifice. Translation and purport by Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada. Translation: Some of them sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind, and the others sacrifice the objects of the senses, such as sound, in the fire of sacrifice. Purport: The four divisions of human life, namely the brahmachari, the grihastha, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi, are all meant to help men become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Such human life is not meant for our enjoying sense gratification like the animals. The four orders of human life are so arranged that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmacharis, or students under the care of a bona fide spiritual master, control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. They are referred to in this verse as sacrificing the hearing process and the senses in the fire of the controlled mind. A brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore the pure brahmachari engages fully in Harer Namanukirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. He restrains himself from the vibrations of material sounds, and his hearing is engaged in the transcendental sound vibration of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Similarly, the householders who have some license for sense gratification perform such acts with great restraint. Sex life, intoxication, and meat eating are general tendencies of human society, but a regulated householder does not indulge in unrestricted sex life and other sense gratifications. Marriage, on principles of religious life, is therefore current in all civilized human society because that is the way for restricted sex life. This restricted, unattached sex life is also a kind of yajna because the restricted householder sacrifices his general tendency toward sense gratification for higher transcendental life. We shall continue to read in the next session. Thank you for your valuable time. Granthara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Vishwa Guru Sri
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.